in your manifesto or for DarkFi, it says Sovereign, quote, in the open air of a fully dark anonymous system, cryptocurrency has the potential to birth new technological concepts centered around sovereignty. This can be a creative, regenerative space, the dawn of a dark renaissance. And also, what I also like is anonymity as a design space has been hitherto unexplored. And so DarkFi is blowing the door to this wide open. Very ambitious, big fan, of the idea. But talk us kind of through like how we get to now, and then what is kind of the future? Like how are we moving in towards more of a DarkFi space, or we were talking about that emerging web? Is it because we're going to get into your essay here in a second, and I think I'll kind of tease it with this is two of the main things that kind of you say in your essay is the biggest thing that you have to deal with is this double-edged sword of anonymity and surveillance. And then also it's a basic question of user empowerment with system anti-fragility or fragility. And that's kind of like the nexus of all these things. But then on top of all of that, there's this kind of regulatory trap that, the systems and powers and institutions that they want to keep power, they want to continue with things, and the only thing they really have is a hammer of a regulatory trap. But then you say that there's a rising political consciousness, the center is being eliminated, and then also there's better yield in towards this kind of lunar punk kind of ideas when you really take surveillance seriously and work against that with encryption. But then also the real thing I think is privacy is like just the main thing in sovereignty. So I know that's a little long-winded, but like, can you just kind of talk us through like the evolution of DarkFi, and then what is kind of in the future for this, and how are you going to distinguish from NFT and ICO hype, and those kind of things?
I will give like a quick kind of overview of where we're at with DarkFi and then where we're going. So currently we are on testnet. It's a alpha testnet. So that's our first testnet. And, on there we have a blockchain, which is using something called Ouroboros Crypsinus. So it's an anonymous proof of stake method, which allows for anonymous leader selection. What that means is basically it's nice. It doesn't suffer for the same DDoS vulnerability as I believe Ethereum and Solana have. And also it's censorship resistant and MIV proof. So there is no MEV on DarkFi. Then alongside that blockchain, we have this general purpose smart contract architecture, which involves like several components. There's one component which is like for zero knowledge, creating the circuits that we will use in applications. And then there's another, which is like the smart contract layer. For that, we use WASM. And, we combine these things. We have currently on DarkFi running several applications. So we have anonymous transactions. These are all using the smart contract architecture. So there's anonymous transactions working, anonymous swaps. They're like an OTC atomic swap that are enabled between any currencies on DarkFi. Then we have anonymous staking and unstaking is available. Finally, the anonymous DAO, which is like the biggest innovation so far. So that's like a fully anonymous DAO. It's the world's first anonymous DAO, and it's working on the testnet. The cool thing, I spoke with someone recently who described it as the most basic DAO primitive, like the distilled DAO. It's a very like simple concept of what a DAO is, but it's very powerful. And what it allows also at the DarkFi side is like on-chain liquidity that can be programmed according to like a logic of a program. So you could use it to engineer any kind of application that requires a concept of like protocol owned liquidity. So like a collectively owned treasury that can be operated according to rules that are set by the treasury. So that's pretty powerful, and it's anonymous. Then, so like we have ZK as a design space is very new. People haven't properly developed the conceptual side of like that paradigm. So you mentioned paradigm shifts, like we're right at the beginning of a new one. And so we're still forming the conceptual basis for this thing. There are some other projects doing like ZKL1s, but they're, in my opinion, they're like rushing into abstractions, and they're not taking the time to really conceptualize what is this new paradigm, and like what are the fundamental techniques, like the patterns that we can abstract away from this. So we're in the process of conceptualizing that. And the way that we conceptualize it is through application design. So we've built these apps so far. We are also working on NFTs. You mentioned NFTs in a kind of dismissive way, and like I'm also but they're interesting in their own right. And so we're building support for them. Then like where things get a little bit trickier and where we're forced to expand our toolkit is like if you want to do something like a AMM. You cannot do an AMM as it exists on ETH. You cannot just like copy paste that over and it be anonymous. So that requires like reconceptualization of the underlying protocol. That's what we mean when we talk about anonymous engineering. The way that we empower the anonymous engineer is like, I mentioned it's not just ZK. Like we have this SDK, which we will continuously add like more techniques to. So the anonymous engineer can like select from all these different tools, like for example, ZK, but also multi-party computation, homomorphic encryption, other techniques in DarkFi. In other areas, we use like Pedersen commitments. So like assembling these to create these applications. But DarkFi itself, you know, the DAO was an important tool because it was informed by our experience with the Assange DAO, which several in DarkFi were involved in. So we raised over 50 million last year to free Assange by all means necessary, which was like, that was our mission statement, free Assange by all means necessary. But then like when it came to it in practice, that was very hard to do because of the fact that we are operating publicly on Ethereum. And also, so we are very restricted in terms of our operation, but also when it came to the actual auction. So we were involved in an auction for an NFT as part of the DAO. The issue is that our treasury size was known publicly. So everyone knew our max bid, which basically broke the mechanics of the auction. No one would bid against us. So like in this way, we think that anonymity as like a variable massively expands the design space of financial engineering. We believe that anonymity is necessary, not just for human freedom, but also for markets to function properly and for game theory to work. So we expect that like, yeah, we want to expand that design space, specifically in the financial side. Like we're interested in self-sovereign communities, which are like financially strong. And like, it's something that we notice is that Ethereum has been managed to enrich itself a lot, like through the community and through the innovations that have happened, like the DAOs, the DeFi, you know, everything that's happened on ETH. But we see that in a lot of the cypherpunk communities. There's a lot of ideological people, but they haven't been able to capture the value that they contribute to the space. So we want to change that. We want a new paradigm of anonymous DAOs to flourish and to allow like free software communities to really capture the value that they create.